You don't have to be in church long to find yourself being hurt or offended. In my ministry, I hear a ton of stories from those who have been hurt by the church, and they're not pretty. Oftentimes the hurt is justified. Someone had lied to them or betrayed them. A pastor had abused their power. Someone had told them that their clothing was wrong or their hairstyle was improper, their actions were inappropriate. History is full of stories about churches who got it wrong. The pain is made worse by the fact that the church should know better. Here are Christians who claim to follow Jesus and are called to love God and people. We expect the church to get it right. How devastating when the people who call themselves Christians become instruments of pain. There are also times when the church loses its focus, when we major on the minors. I remember one controversy in my church growing up. Should communion be held in the evening service? People were arguing everywhere, quoting scripture references at each other. There was even a meeting after meeting in the church to discuss it. As a teenager, I wondered what all the fuss was about. Of course, some of the topics the church has to navigate are not so minor. I recall one movement of churches reviewing the biblical basis for divorce. Originally, adultery and abandonment were seen to be the only legitimate reasons. But then there came the recognition of domestic abuse. As time passes, the church needs to constantly negotiate issues such as these. We see a similar scenario in the early church. Back then the question was, should you eat the meat that had been used in pagan sacrifices? The rule of thumb then was that love should always be the ruling principle. But sadly, the rule of love is not always upheld. Sometimes the church does get it wrong and leaves damaged people in its wake. What do we do then? Well, first we should recognise what the church is and what it isn't. The church is made up of flawed, sinful people, just like you and I. People that are saved by grace and made righteous by Jesus. But they're also on a journey to becoming like him. And every person is at a different stage. Some are just starting, others are further along. We're all still learning what it means to imitate Christ. So what we must never do is confuse the church for Jesus. And that includes pastors and leaders. Yes, they are called to higher account, but sometimes they too get it wrong. I knew of a church whose pastor committed adultery. It was a devastating scenario. He had led his congregation for over 20 years. They felt so betrayed by his actions. As a result, some walked away from the church. They had confused Jesus with Jesus' followers. God alone is worthy of our trust. His character alone is unchanging and faithful. While pastors and leaders are called to lead our communities, their priority is to point us to Jesus, the one who will never let us down. God is the one we must keep our eyes on. Secondly, when we're hurt by the church, we're called to forgive. This is 101 Christianity. It's hard, but it lies at the core of our faith. Jesus said if we don't forgive others, we won't be able to receive his forgiveness. And it's because God forgives us that we can forgive others. That doesn't mean the person or the church who's hurt us is let off the hook for bad behaviour. But God says, ultimately, we must leave the justice to him. As a church pastor, it pains me to see so many living with the pain and bitterness of being hurt by the church. I'm so sorry that you might have experienced this by the people who should know better. I pray you will find the grace to accept the sins of others and then work through a process of forgiveness for those who have wronged you. Let's be the ones who don't wait for others to do the right thing. Let's forgive the church who has wronged us, and in doing so, be the church. Thanks for tuning into Everyday God Conversations today. I hope that's been helpful to you. For more on the church and how to have your own God conversations, subscribe to the fortnightly God Conversations newsletter at godconversations.com.